Мы рады, что вы пришли к нам в гости.
Delighted to see you here at our science festival. Today we'll have a traditional teleconference with the International Space Station, so please sit closer to each other so that we have more space available here to accommodate more people. This is, I think, our 10th teleconference with the International Space Station, and many space crews participated in the teleconference before. And I've got to say that space exploration to Moscow State University is one of the key areas for scientific research. The large centrifuge, which is working in the Center for Astronaut Training, was developed under the supervision of the president of our university. And just recently we opened a new department for space exploration. The department is headed by Vladimir Solovyov, and after today's teleconference he will have his own talk. And now I would like to hand over to my colleagues who come from the research institution of nuclear physics, and I don't want you to be misled by the name of this think tank. A lot of its work is about space exploration, and also of its satellites, starting with the second one, had equipment developed by that university. And so let's start our teleconference. Dear friends, we will be technical assistants over the course of this teleconference. We would like to thank our partners for helping us to collect a great number of questions for our astronauts. RIA Novosti and Sputnik news agency assisted us, and we also got assistance from Zaryadye Park. And now I would like to give the floor to the representative from Sputnik news agency. Thank you. My name is Dmitry Barshevsky, and I represent international news agency Sputnik. And since we are called Sputnik, we've got to participate in this event, and we are broadcasting in 30 languages. So we got questions from the entire world, from all over across the world, from Iran, from European countries, all sorts of questions. We picked the most interesting ones, and it's a great honor to us to ask these questions to the astronauts. Have you ever talked to an astronaut whilst he's in the outer space? I've never done this before, so I'm very, very excited. Moscow State University. We have been involved into space exploration programs for some time already, and the Nuclear Physics Research Institution installed its equipment on all satellites which were launched in the USSR. Now we've got two satellites in the orbit which were built by our people and our students. They are called Nuklon and Lomonosov, and mathematicians, biologists, physicists, They have their experiments currently set up at the International Space Station. International Space Station comprises a number of modules, but it is generally divided into two segments. The Russian segment, which has two large sections, cargo section and technical section, and American section. American section includes European, American, Japanese modules. So we've got 7 minutes before the start of the teleconference. We have tested the link between us and the flight control center, and in a minute, almost in several minutes, we'll get connected to the ISS. So we'll ask questions from. So we have questions here from all over across the world, not just from Moscow, not just from Russia, but we collected questions virtually from many countries across the globe. We don't know the answers to these questions, and we were excited, really excited to read them. International Space Station is a project that brings countries together. We keep hearing about confrontations between countries, but there are no borders out there in this space. And Russian, American, and European colleagues are working close to each other in the control station, in the control center, and we have also people in Houston, and we have people out there in the orbit. Now it's the 57th crew. 3 people in the crew. We've got a person from Roscosmos, a person from NASA, who is American, and we've got also a German there on board, a representative of the European Space Agency. All crews go to the orbit for 6 months. This is related to the technical parameters of Soyuz spacecraft, which is located there. So if something goes wrong, they can all go to this emergency evacuation craft, and it's recently we tested whether a crew can spend 1 year there, 1 year in the orbit, and it is physiologically and psychologically quite challenging, but over the course of that flight we managed to collect a lot of valuable information. And this is very important data to make sure that the mankind, following the advice of or the aspirations of Tsiolkovsky, it is important for the mankind to leave its cradle and head towards the Mars. So I think we have around 3 minutes before the start of the teleconference. Manned space flights are invaluable. It's a clear manifestation. It's a clear manifestation of superiority of the human intellect. It's a manifestation of the fact that countries can work together, but also it has a lot of practical value for all sorts of sciences, starting with astrophysics and cosmology, and all the way through to obtaining pure substances for medical purposes. On board the station, we have a lot of scientific and laboratory equipment, and the crew, spending most of its working time working with these test devices and equipment. The crew knows beforehand what is the plan for the day, so some of their time is spent on medical experiments and physiological experiments, and some of these experiments are held with participation of the crew. So it is the crew who is being very carefully studied. One of the most ambitious experiments which we had there is astromagnetic spectrometer, which is research which is studying the nature of the cosmic radiation or cosmic rays. These are probably the most interesting experiments which we currently have, and we combine the results of these experiments with the Large Hadron Collider, with the results of the Large Hadron Collider. Then it gives a lot of food for thought. We also focus a lot on nuclear experiments. And it is the Moscow University which prepared the equipment for all satellites, starting with the second satellite that was launched into the space. In the first satellite, there was just a radio transmitter which was sending signals from the orbit to the Earth, whereas all other satellites were launched into the space bearing scientific equipment and test devices. So we directly participate in all these experiments, which are currently held on board of the ISS. Just be mindful of just remember that our equipment from Moscow State University is out there to
Пока нет экипажа. Сейчас в ЦУПе нас слышат. ЦУП Москва, ответьте, Королев.
Flight Control Center. How do you read me, Moscow State University?
Спасибо.
Flight Control Center.
У нас ЦУП Москва, у нас здесь зал народу, и мы коллектив организаторов благодарим
We would like to thank
ЦУПа и главную оперативную группу
the personnel of the Flight Control Center, all those of you, the entire shift from the Flight Control Center. We understand how technically challenging it is. So every time when we try to put pieces of this jigsaw together, we know that you are supporting us from your end and you will help us in case something happens. How many people are there? It's around 400 people here in this lecture auditorium. So it's time for the radio contact already. Let's get prepared to ask questions.
Да, или сколько бы? Да. 50 миллионов аудитории РИА Новости. И мы передаем спутник. Вот по этой же штуке.
Часть вопросов будет задаваться в виде видео, соответственно, которое записало агентство «Спутник».
Это вопросы из разных стран. Мы уже подготовили.
Some of these questions are video recorded.
Видео первого вопроса. То есть это не экипаж.
So what you see, the picture you see at the screen right now, so that person is not from the crew of the ISS.
Пока мы ожидаем экипаж, у нас пока...
Whilst we are waiting for the connection, oh, there we go. We have a connection. Moscow State University. We are delighted to greet the 57th crew of the ISS. We have around 500 people here in the room, and probably over 50 million of subscribers of RIA Novosti and Sputnik News Agency. We have collected the best or the most interesting questions from all over across the world. Let's start with Czechia. What or who do you think about during the liftoff? Thank you, and all the best to you. Thank you very much for the interesting question. Astronauts and cosmonauts, first and foremost, think about making sure that everything goes well, everything goes according to the plan. So that's an interesting question. What do we tend to fear? We are always afraid that the launch can go wrong, because that means that all the preparation that went into it will be wasted. So first and foremost, cosmonauts think about making sure that everything goes well as planned. Thank you. So, a question from Serbia. Video recorded question. How much time did it take you to learn how to eat and drink in zero-gravity environment? That's a good question. It takes a skill, actually, and it is quite difficult. For the first 3 or 4 days, you've got to get accustomed to this. You've got to get used. So all the pieces of food which you try to put into your mouth tend to fly away from you. So you've got crumbs or droplets of water everywhere, but not where you want them to be. But in 2 or 3 days after you get used to it, this is not the most difficult thing you've got to face in the outer space. And our next question, I'll read it myself. It's from our users from the Arabic world. Are cosmonauts susceptible to some sort of radiation or other harmful effects in the outer space, in the orbit? Of course. We have more intensive radiation here. Sure. So there is more radiation even as compared to the aircraft, which is flying at 10,000 meters. But the parameters of these radiation are well calculated. So we do know how much radiation we took. So if you take 10 half-year flights, it's okay. So you mean you can make 10 6-month flights and your body can sustain this. This is probably radiation is the most difficult effect in this space, because currently we think about long flights to the moon or flight to the Mars, and radiation will be the most serious effect which we need to take into account, because magnetic field of the Earth protects us from this radiation to a great extent. But once you don't have that shield around you, once you're above 20,000 kilometers, then the radiation can be deadly. So the mankind needs to think about ways to protect cosmonauts from radiation. Thank you. Another question from the Middle East. So when you walk into the outer space, are you scared by the infinite abyss which is in front of you? It's a very exciting moment. Once you open that hatch into the outer space for the first time in your life, you need to be psychologically prepared to that moment. It's very exciting. I think, in a way, you can compare it to your first jump with a parachute. Those of you who remembered that, or those of you who jumped, know that you need to prepare yourself to make this step. So I'd compare it with what you feel during your first jump with a parachute. But then you're out there in the space and you start thinking about work. How do you do this? How do you do that? And you don't have a lot of time there. And you tend to forget about the fact that you are in the outer space. You just do your work. You just need to be mindful of the fact that you always remain connected to the station. But the first steps are very exciting. Thank you. And a question from Turkey and Iran, a video recorded question. Does immune system of a human being changes over the course of a space flight, or can you fall ill whilst being out there in the orbit? And how do you treat yourself if that happens? Whilst preparing to a space flight, before going into the spacecraft, the crew is quarantined for 2 weeks. So you don't have a lot of interaction with the world. So those viruses which your body could have collected either express themselves or tend to be cured. So we undergo special treatment. So our clothes is treated, our body is treated with chemicals, so that we could minimize the number of microorganisms which get into the ISS. So here in the ISS we don't have any harmful microorganisms. And for 4.5 months I've noticed that there are certain conditions under which you would have definitely fallen ill on the Earth. We do not tend to fall ill here. So in a way we're more protected here than on the Earth. Thank you. What were your first minutes and hours on the orbit like? Wasn't your vestibular system shocked by the sudden cut of the normal information flow? And if it did, what does this feeling look like? It's not very pleasant. So once the spacecraft launches to the orbit and it starts spinning, because it needs to be focused on the sun to make sure that the solar panels remain oriented towards the sun, and you start feeling a bit uncomfortable, like staying on the merry-go-round, and your vestibular system is sending signals to you about this. But it happens differently. There are people who adapt to this quickly. There are cosmonauts who may take a week to adapt properly. But there is one thing I can say. You tend to get accustomed to zero-gravity environment, and from then on it becomes fun. But before you get used to it, yes, it may be slightly uncomfortable, but there are certain drugs which you can take to minimize this effect. Also, cosmonauts and astronauts undergo special training before they go to the ISS. For 2 weeks, we are training. We have an intensive training for our vestibular system in specially designed armchairs. But first moments are maybe quite uncomfortable, but you need to go over it and then it will be okay. It's good fun staying in zero gravity. Thank you. How many hours a day do you sleep? And does it take a lot of coffee to get yourself going in the morning? On average, our schedule here is like on the Earth. So we sleep probably slightly less than we do on the Earth, simply because in zero gravity, your body is relaxed. So your muscles are not strained, and you don't need a lot of time to recover. Like, for example, 5 or 6 hours is enough of sleep is enough to me. Some take from 7 to 8. In some cases, even 4 or 5 hours is more than enough. But as far as coffee is concerned, well, those who like coffee, they drink coffee, some drink chocolate or just tea. Thank you. How do cosmonauts and astronauts watch their weight in the space? Is it difficult to keep yourself fit and train on the exercising machine? And what is the difference between training on the Earth and training out there in the space? This is a very important point. An important part of the space flight. Weight in this space is measured with the help of a specially designed equipment. There is a special weight meter, which is pendulum type weight meter. So you measure the frequency of pendulum swing, and then this frequency is interpreted and your weight is calculated. So we take our weight around once in a month, and we send this information to the Earth, and physical exercises in this space. We have a treadmill, for example, but the treadmill you are connected to the treadmill physically. Your shoulders are strapped to the treadmill and your hips are strapped to the treadmill. So this fastening system imitates the body weight, and we tend to train at 70 or 75% of our weight. So if my actual weight is around 85 kilos, then the fastening system will be set on 75. So we have 2 physical training sessions and a day, and in total we exercise for 2 or 2.5 hours. We also have a lift weighting machine at which we tend to exercise our legs, our body. So it is very important that we at least exercise once a day, and our doctors tend to watch it very carefully. But our physical condition in the Earth in the space is better than in the Earth, because we exercising there more regularly. On the Earth, it is more difficult to make yourself exercise. Please tell us, what kind of experiments do you run on the ISS, and can we use the results of these experiments for long flights to the Moon and to the Mars? Before, there was a question about radiation, and the study of cosmic radiation is part of getting prepared to long space flights. Studying the effect of radiation on a human body is crucially important to understand our potential and our capability to make long flights. We have Matryoshka experiment on the ISS, and that's exactly its point. We study the effect of radiation, the harmful effect of radiation on a human body, and we also study possible ways to prevent these harmful effects over the course of long space flights. And apart from that, we have a number of medical experience. We watch the medical parameters of our body, and this work is ongoing. So by studying how well people feel in space, we are capable of determining whether the human beings can. We lost the feed.
Инженеры, что происходит?
Похоже, мы вышли из зоны видимости.
It appears to be that the ISS is currently in the shadow.
Принято, 1 минута. Техника, так бывает.
Connection interrupted for 1 minute. They're getting switched over from one satellite to another. Originally, we thought that our teleconference will be long enough for us to stay in the coverage of one satellite, but now the ISS have left that coverage area and we're getting reconnected through another satellite. So we can hear you now. We don't have the video yet, but we can hear you. So please ask questions. Have you ever had to face any situations which were difficult to explain during your Soyuz flights or on ISS? Or have you ever made discoveries which you didn't expect at all? Thank you. Thank you for the question. Can you hear me well? Yes, we can hear you. A space flight is something to which we prepare for a long time, and we hope that everything goes well and everything goes as planned, or at least the emergency situation will be those which we planned, but it is not always so. Just recently, we had the situation when 3 days ago, Alexei Ovchinin and Nick Hague, their launching vehicle at the height of 50 kilometers, the first stage did not disengage properly. We were watching from ISS. We were watching the launching vehicle to leave the atmosphere of the Earth, so we could see it, and we saw the exhaust fumes. But then the launching vehicle disengaged from the spacecraft, and we saw that the spacecraft returned to the Earth, and we lost the sight of it. As we all know now, they used the emergency evacuation system. They managed to return to the ground. They're both alive and in good health. So that's a kind of a situation which you may face. So they didn't make it to the ISS. The equipment did not arrive. Some cargoes did not arrive, but the most important thing is that the astronauts and and cosmonauts are alive and in good health, and we'll build another spacecraft. And it is very important that the emergency saving system has proved to be efficient and reliable, which indicates the overall reliability of our spacecraft. Thank you. Do you have flies, mosquitoes, or cockroaches on the ISS, which have been accidentally delivered to the station? Because these creatures can live under any conditions. Unfortunately, sometimes we get them brought from the Earth to here, and also we have experiments to perform on laboratory mice, and they may be staying at the ISS for 6 months, but they live in special environment, so they are fed automatically. The air is pumped into their capsules automatically. So we have some other creatures here, but not like in the Earth, when you can have them uncontrolled. We don't have cockroaches or flies or mosquitoes, because I told you before that we undergo special chemical treatment before we fly into the space, so there are no parasites here. Thank you very much to the crew. Thank you very much to the Flight Control Center. All the best to you, and each and every luck with your experiments. And thank you very much, and good luck to you.
Сейчас. Так, уважаемые посетители телемоста, следующая у нас лекция. Здесь в зале будет читать дважды Герой Советского Союза, летчик-космонавт, руководитель полета российского сегмента Международной космической станции, заместитель генерального конструктора РКК «Энергия» и научный руководитель факультета космических исследований МГУ. Те вопросы, которые были в зале, которые не отобраны были специальной комиссией, вы можете задать очень опытному космонавту, который с минуты на минуту придет сюда в зал. Спасибо. Перерыв 5 минут.